Why are you here?
I'm looking for a great warrior.
So what kind of warrior have you been?
The way of the warrior.
He needed a warrior's mind.
Clearly, this was all planned by warriors of...
Warriors. Now is the time.
Hi, this is Radhika, and you're listening to the Warrior of Impact podcast, and I am a warrior of grace.
All right, you are listening to the Warrior of Impact podcast. This is Michael, as always, with Shannon, and we have another special guest on with us today. We have our Director of Operations. We have Radhika, and we want to take some of this time today to really kind of give her a platform to tell her story and her daughter's story. And really the way that we got to know each other was a couple of years back. We had connected because she was looking for a team to be able to help support her, tell her daughter's story. In doing so, we got to meet Akira, and I truly believe that like Akira's become my little spirit animal. Her and I just have a lot of similarities in our process. Me being somebody who's come from a pediatric illness can totally relate. And then on top of that, for a shy little girl, to just become so friendly with me and us have this relationship of just really caring, and I see that love in her eyes when she just dances or does any of the things she does. So it just it's an amazing opportunity to be able to continue to find ways to support Akira, to support Radhika, and obviously it just is going to always be a precedent when we can support people on our team, especially in this platform. So Radhika, if you want to just maybe give a quick introduction, just about your backstory, or maybe not even quick, just give us the tea.
The tea, where to start? I think where to start is Akira's 6.5 and has a brother, Keyshawn, who's 5. I thought I would never be able to have children. Akira was my 40th birthday present, and total complete surprise in many good ways. So I was trying to get pregnant and could not, and didn't even know I was until I was in my second trimester. So she was truly a blessing. What I did not know is what she would be facing 6.5 years later, which simply is a very rare form of epilepsy, a genetic mutation. And unfortunately, she, endured some medical trauma that has caused other issues, which we're really just finally understanding after 4 years of a lot of hospitalizations. And so it's been a journey.
So let's take it back just a quick step, because I know, and whatever you're comfortable with for sure, share some of your journey first, because I think that part of the reason why you and I connect so well, I think, is that from our first conversation, I was like, oh yeah, this woman's a warrior. Like this woman, I remember the three of us actually sat down at the ale house that one day, and we're talking through your story and going through this, as I like to say, like that 10,000 foot vantage point, and I'm like, yeah, we're in the right tribe here, which is vital, but there's a reason for that, right? And so we find strength through adversity, but the goal is to like kick adversity to the curb. But just share a little bit of your story and what you're comfortable with, because I think that really just sets the precedent for the strength that you show as the advocate for Akira.
Well, I'm originally from India. Came to the United States and lived in Bronx, New York. That in of itself, as a toddler, was really interesting to navigate, and not speaking English was really interesting. And we did our typical immigrant story, working our way out of the hood, right, into suburbia. And I faced a lot of racism. Was also the oldest daughter, and helping to raise 2 kids and 2 parents who, barely spoke English. So that was also really a lot of advocacy work. I didn't understand I was being groomed to be an advocate. Went to college and became a special ed teacher. Never understood why I thought I wanted to do special ed, but definitely found out why having Akira. And, as I was working, I actually ended up getting sick, and nobody understood why or what. I had this rare tumor disease, kept coming back. I'd have surgery. I'd have tumors back 3 weeks later. Could not figure it out. And really had to stop my life. and actually be present and understand why this kept coming back. And as soon as I did, it all went away. They told me I was going to die. I needed chemo, needed radiation, didn't do any of it. Didn't want to do any of it. So I really had to learn some grit and practice some grace and learn, how to get a hold of that. And I did. And definitely groomed me to have Akira and be fighting and advocating for her the way I have to. So
do you think that because you had to advocate for yourself in that situation that it helped you be able to advocate for Akira now?
Oh, absolutely. That tumor disease started when I was in my mid-20s. It took 12 years of my life, so I really became an adult, right? Having to learn to speak up for myself and advocate for not just medical services, but even emotional support. Friends all disappeared. And it was sort of like colleagues and sort of older folks, in my circle that really created that support system or that net so I could, figure out how to survive. So yes, absolutely.
And I think you're speaking on a very important point of being able to find your voice. I think we talk a lot of times about finding your voice in the sense of understanding your message or being able to share your story. But I think what you're talking about is almost more important, is finding your voice in giving yourself permission to speak up.
Oh yeah.
That's I think step one. Even you have to be I'm not going to put up with the shit that's going on around me. I'm not going to just sit in this hellstorm. If the difference between me sitting here or not is me just saying something. And it's sad because I think we recognize that people will sit by as spectators of it because they assume because you're not saying anything, you're doing okay, or you're strong enough, or you're surviving. And so sometimes we have to do that work for them in the sense of nope, I need help, or maybe not even I need help, but what is being done to me is not right.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that that's a very important point to make.
And here in this country, we often have we've been taught to trust our doctors. And when they say, this is how it is, this is what you need, this is what I think, that we're taught not to question that. Right. And so I think that it's very brave of you that you were able to say, no, I'm not going to go this course that you've laid out for me. I'm going to navigate it myself and do it my way.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, the last time I heard this whole, your tumors are back and this is what you have to do next, I literally wrote on a piece of paper, fuck science, let universe.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did, right? Yeah. Because I was absolutely not. I'm not going to have yet another traumatizing surgery, go for chemo and radiation. And I actually did. I entertained it. I went to Dana-Farber. They took a picture of my face and started showing me what they were going to do. And I was like, nope, I'm good. Thank you. Bye. And I healed myself, and I actually used food and some spiritual practices and a lot of, emotional support to overcome my health issues. And as soon as I chose to do that, it was everything went away. Yeah. It was crazy. I went back for scans and they were like, you had 3 tumors. Where'd they go? Gone.
And I think it's important to remember, the doctors do their part. And this is how I've talked about this in other podcasts. It's the doctors do their part. God, universe, spirituality, whatever that is, that does their part. And then you do the rest.
Right.
And so that's it. You change your diet, you sought a better support system, you made the adjustments to your emotional well-being. That's stuff that's on you, but it shouldn't have to be on you. That's why I think another good point is the people that you surround yourself with in crisis is the difference sometimes from maybe not so much getting through the crisis, because we can't rely or throw that on other people, but it's maybe navigating through the crisis a little bit more with that grace that we always talk so well about. Because I think that's important. And as adults, it's hard to make friends as adults. Let's just be honest. Yeah, the people that we know now are in 2 categories: people that we knew pre-adult and people that we worked with. or, it's, and it kind of stumbles upon that way, or the people that you meet, here and there, or friends of friends, and it grows, but it's like, it's not as organic as it when you're younger. So when you're in the process, and I think I've all can probably relate to this, you're when you are in that pit of despair, you feel lonely, and that's like the hardest time to meet somebody new or make a friend or to get support. But oftentimes that's the moment that we recognize that we actually need it. And so when we can find it in that moment, in that storm, in that season, it's that much more cherishable, because we know the people that show up then, they're kind of our ride or dies. It's like Shannon and I have been working together now for 8 years, and we've met each other in very interesting seasons of our life. Radhika, we've been friends since 2020, like literally the shitstorm of all seasons. And, we've built this level of commitment to each other of we're ride or die for life. It's wherever the business has taken a couple of iterations and turns and lefts and rights. And every time it's like, hey, I've got this idea, you're my sounding board. And then you're like, all right, well, let's go, strap in. But that's so important to have that. And I think that that's a vital takeaway to build out, this foundation. So as a 20-something-year-old who is facing this, and I can relate, how do you navigate, and maybe this is important from a now mother's experience, and maybe comparing that to a young female, because that's obviously something that I cannot talk about, nor should I, but I'm fascinated by the approach of parenting on the horizon or not. Obviously, your immigrant background story has a lot from a societal standpoint, because there are certain stereotypical expectations that are put upon you as the oldest child. You've got to bear the fruit, you've got to get married, you've got to, go get a good career, and you got to have kids. These are just expectations that are thrust on you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then how you pair that with being sick, which in a culture like that, and I understand the cultural differences, sickness is not an excuse, sickness is not an understanding, and they almost don't process it, especially from a spiritual culture where, well, we'll just, pray the sickness away, or, it's just not meant to be, and rationalizing science and the God particle and all of that. How do you approach that from a woman who's being told children's not in your future, and this agenda of checklists that you've been kind of thrust upon you your whole life is now suddenly a non-factor?
It took hearing at 39, we're going to keep you for 3 more days and you're going to have a hysterectomy. Akira was an instant decision. It was absolutely the best decision I have made in my entire life. My 20s, I was crying every day. I failed every single one of those boxes, right? Failed getting married, failed having a $500,000 career salary, failed getting married and doing all these other things, having children, a big house, big fancy cars. And I didn't know what to do with it then. I mean, I was beside myself, but I was so sick, I couldn't really focus on it. So in a way, it was a blessing that I was that sick. I couldn't sort of get too lost in that. But at that very moment at 39, when I heard those words of you're going to have a hysterectomy, I was like, nope, I'm going to go and have a kid. I don't know how I'm going to take care of this kid. Don't know how I'm going to take care of myself today, but I'm going to do it. And you know what? Totally have. And I had a second blessing of another child, and he has been by far the, sunshine in my life. So I have no regrets, but it is really hard, I think, in your 20s to think about that. You just feel like this crushing pressure of, oh my God, I didn't do what my parents said, or didn't do what my culture or society says I should do. And yeah, they tried to do all these, you're just wanting attention. You're not really sick. You're fine. Everything's okay. And I was like, oh my God, she's dying. She can't get married to anybody. That was also really confusing. It was like so many mixed messages. I was like, I don't know who to trust. I don't know who to follow, so I didn't. I did a lot of it all by myself and really hid behind a computer in terms of working. And this was sort of pre, Google and everything else. People had no idea how sick I was, had no idea how many surgeries I had, how bad shape I was in. At one point, I lost my speech. I just used a computer, wrote a lot of emails, and used AOL Instant Messenger. Nobody knew. And when people found out, they were horrified. They were like, why didn't you tell us? We would have come to help you. But, at that time, my culture said, you don't tell anybody you're sick. You don't tell anybody you have all these problems. You just figure it out all by yourself. And today, I absolutely disagree. It's not to say you should go stand on rooftops and announce that you're sick, right? But you do need to find that support system. It's so critical. Doesn't matter if it's a therapist or one friend, or both, really. But it's really, I think it's so important to have that support system. And you have to find your voice to say, I need help with X, Y, Z. And you just keep saying it until somebody hears you enough, and I can testify that Akira's been diagnosed for 3 years now. And only after 3 years do we finally have a case manager. Do we finally actually have some real support for Akira that's going to help her? But it took 6 hospitalizations to get it. And me saying the same thing again and again.
Yeah. And what I recognize is through my life is the people that advocate for others the most are often the ones that need the most advocacy.
Yes.
Because I think that there's, much like anything else in life, you get put into this, depending on, a situation, you can take 2 paths with it. And it's usually these levels of extreme, I'm slowly shifting away from the all or nothing mentality as best as I can, but it really does tend to be, a little black and white in the sense of you are either somebody who crumbles and just like goes inward, or you're somebody who overly serves to try to not let somebody else deal with what you dealt with. And maybe that's the subconscious way of looking at it, but that's what it winds up becoming, one of those 2 kind of situations. And it makes it extremely difficult because the one thing that I think we can all relate to is that we've all had these traumatic experiences that have thrust us into that one extreme side where we serve and maybe overly serve. Mm-hmm. And we've done a good job as a team of finding that balance together. I've been like, all right, let's check each other. Like Radhika, you and we've had many conversations where you're like, all right, come off the ledge a little bit. And this is a positive ledge. Like you're going a little too far out there for others. And how are you doing? And I think that those are those great moments. And it's simple questions like that. And when we say support, it doesn't mean that you have to give 40 hours a week to somebody or always be on speed dial. It's as simple as a 12 seconds of your day text message. Are you good? How are you? Or when you recognize that something's going on, or, Akira's in the hospital, like, how can we help? What can we do? What can we offload? And I think that that's just an important thing. Asking for help is not a matter of checks and balances. It's, I have taken on too much, or I am not able to handle what I can't handle minimum. Like it's, there's a scale to it, right? And it's not, let me help you. What can you do for me down the road? It's how can I relieve some of your angst? And I think that tribe mentality is ultimately we're trying to build outward, with our clients, with our groups, with each other. And I think it starts internally. And I think that's what's so vital about this conversation, is this is our team. This is our full team. And one of the amazing things about it that Shannon and I were talking about, and we've never even brought this to point, we are 3 members of our team. All of us are single parents. All of us are full-time single parents. Now talk about that support. We found our specific tribe. And I think that's the beautiful thing about it. When you look, you find. When you ask, you get the answers. When you surround yourself with people who are like-minded, who have the same goals, same, maybe not so much same interest, but the same ambition, the same, goals in that sense. And you allow yourself to lean a little bit and pick up where you can pick up and say, give what you can, take what you need, and we'll always be there. And since we've adopted that approach, I mean, you think about it, we've been in the pandemic running 2 businesses that are, slowly getting back up and making real impact more than anything. And I love that it starts with our team first, because to me, that's the most vital part. It's the culture that we've adapted, and we live, eat, breathe warrior every day. I talk about it's not, like warrior is a noun, it's a living essence, it's an energy. And I love that about us as a collective unit. We have our group chats, we have our phone calls, we have our meetings, but at the end of the day, we all get to walk a little bit taller, knowing that, if all this shit was to burn down tomorrow, each one of us said, well, I got two people at least would cry with me. I have two people that will listen to me. I have two people that will help me up if I fall down. And then if we can expand that to the clients and expand that to the community and expand that beyond, to me, that's a hell of a mission. And I think that I just wanted to recognize that, because I think that's so vital as we step in through this process of, backstory to the here and now.
I want to step back for just a second, because you mentioned we're in a pandemic. Radhika, did that have a negative effect on trying to get resources and trying to get Akira the help that she needed? I know that during the worst part of COVID, that a lot of the medical community was focused solely on that. So did that have an impact on how you were able to advocate and how you were able to get resources for Akira?
Oh, absolutely. It's impacted. I mean, we got diagnosed pre-COVID, but literally we were on the coattails of COVID. COVID was already here. People just didn't call it COVID, right? So that would have been October. And I think COVID was declared officially the tail end of February, early March the following year. So, the problem we had was there were suspicions of what she had. I couldn't prove it. Then she had a grand mal seizure, March 29th, trying to go to the hospital to get a EEG and EKG done because her heart rate was out of control. They were like, oh yeah, we can't do that. You have to wait 6 weeks. I said, so my child should keep falling up and down the stairs, welts on her face, because CPS is going to come and put me in jail and take her away. Because nobody will believe me that she keeps falling down. She's having seizures. I can't prove it, but I know that's what it has to be. And it wasn't until a pediatric anesthesiologist was like, I hear you. I red flagged everybody. I had every pediatric chief something in our room in the ER. And they were like, are you a physician? No, I just know how to advocate for my daughter. And one of you all is going to do something. It's like, I don't care that COVID has got everything shut down. Somebody needs to put something on her head and let me know that she has something wrong with her. It's like, why does she keep falling down? And he finally said, I'm going to carry her over the finish line. I promise. Gave me his personal cell phone number. He checked on us. That was Friday. So we got to get tested on Tuesday and knew by Wednesday morning that she had what she had. But, it was a really painful process, because I was basically yelling at people. And I think you all know me enough to know I don't yell. So if I'm yelling, that's a problem. But I had every single, I even had the head of it nursing in my room, because I was like, nope, I just started calling everybody. I went on my phone. Thank God for Google and internet on phones. I just started calling everybody in the hospital. People just started showing up one by one. The anesthesiologist finally said, I know what to do. I will help her. And he called a colleague of his who was a neurologist who really helped us, get started with how to treat her. But yeah, it definitely, and still, it took us 14 months to see a geneticist. It took us, I think it was 19 months to see a developmental pediatrician specifically for what she has. So it did, because they were like, oh, we're not seeing any patients. They actually did the evaluation by Zoom. It was crazy. And it was like the first doctor Zoom visit that we ever did. I was like, you're not putting hands on my child, but the doctor told me what to do to report what I felt. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but sure. It was crazy. So yes, and it still actually is affecting her services, because there's still a lot of things I can't access for her yet, because I'm waiting for the pandemic clearance. She needs to have another round of testing. I just got told yesterday, 13 months from yesterday.
Before they can do the testing?
And unless COVID somehow concludes that they will not be able to accelerate her timeline, I'm like, So she should be without services for another 13 plus months because you guys can't do this. I'm like, I don't understand. Who can I see? Who can I go to? They were like, well, you can call around, but the problem is what she needs done. There's like 3 doctors in Wake County who do it. I could go out of state, but I'm not in a position to go out of state to get her that kind of testing. And the testing alone is expensive. So yeah, it's like a conundrum. What do you do? And how do you wait that long?
So just so that like people can understand and maybe like finding a way to do it. I try not to, when I explain things, not to go into super crazy medical terms because I think it just gets lost in our head. Like we can talk about it and we understand, but give us like a synopsis of her condition and by all means talk about, the name and things like that, but as close to layman terms, and take your time with it. Cause I want to really try to make sure that we can help people understand the full scope, before we get into, a lot more of kind of Akira's story. Cause that's where I want to go to.
Well, Akira has a genetic mutation that fuels this rare form of epilepsy, which is called myoclonic aesthetic epilepsy. There's only 47 kids in the world who have it. There are more children who are being diagnosed, and really they were, let's say, misdiagnosed or mislabeled autistic, but really they're starting to find out once they see that genetic mutation that it is actually epilepsy. So she has this genetic mutation, which causes epilepsy. At the same time, she has encephalopathy, which is brain swelling. My hypothesis is she has vaccine injury, and that encephalopathy or the brain swelling actually is interfering with her epilepsy. So she has a seizure and she has this period of disorientation or discombobulation where nobody knows what to do to help her, how to support her. And, the type of epilepsy she has causes her to have poor muscle control. Her muscles are weak. And so we have to do a lot of physical therapy, occupational therapy, trying to really maintain that muscle tone. She loses that muscle tone and she tends to have more and more seizures. So there really isn't a downtime for physical activity or, keeping her busy, because what we don't want to see is that increase in seizures. And we do see increase in seizures and there's still no explanation. So she was very recently hospitalized within 30 minutes of us going to the emergency room. And still today, they have no explanation for what's going on with the dysfunction of her brain, but it's truly a dysfunction,
So explain to me a little bit about Akira as a baby. Like, just kind of give me like, and really more specifically when you started recognizing, any sort of disparity that, maybe in hindsight makes sense now that maybe didn't then. Cause I think that like we've talked, like that grand mal seizure was kind of like the exclamation point, but
yes,
maybe there was some other things in hindsight that you're like, oh, her development was accelerated here, but maybe back here. So maybe just give us a little.
Oh, absolutely. Well, one for sure is she never crawled. She went from sitting to literally in 2.5 days, she taught herself how to walk at 7 months old. And what she never did was run. And I used to always be like, how come she doesn't run? She wouldn't climb furniture, wasn't jumping on furniture. I thought that was weird. But everybody is like, oh, she has global developmental delays. I have degrees in special education. I still don't know what that means. But I'm like, okay, I don't know. But yeah, okay, if that's the way you explain that she's not meeting her milestones or benchmarks, then sure. The other thing is she would mouth words, but there was no sound. And I just thought that was so strange. Now, I didn't start talking till I was 5, but I could talk. I was just traumatized by my early childhood life that I think I just didn't talk, right? But she actually couldn't talk. Could see her mouthing mama, but the sound never came out. So I had her tested early intervention, which is when we discovered she had a speech delay. She still has a speech delay. She's talking. She's doing great, but she is still behind in her speech. So those are things that really were critical. The thing, though, that stood out to me that I could never get anybody to agree with me is she would have these crazy eye flutterings. Her eyes would just flutter. I couldn't. I'm I'm like, what is going on? And it was always when I asked her to like try to learn a color, learn the alphabets, learn the numbers. I was like, is something wrong with her? I was like, why does she keep doing that? The neurologist was like, you're overreacting, Mom. That's just like a tick. It's no big deal. I was like, no, that's not a tick. I was like, that's something weird. I don't know. So that was a seizure. And I did not know it was a seizure. Even the eye doctor actually witnessed it and said, that's nothing. And then she had this one thing that would happen. So on her right leg, from her right hip to the top of her right knee would shake when she walked. Akira was like 16 pounds when she was a year old. She was tiny. And they were like, oh, it's nothing. She'll be fine. 3-year-old wellness appointment. We had a new pediatrician and the guy was like, what's that about? Because it would happen to her all the time. I was like, I think it's a seizure. I don't know why it's only there, but nobody believes me and says that she doesn't need any help. So we started PT then and they were like, yeah, we don't know if that's a seizure, but something's wrong. But yeah. So it was kind of crazy because we had all these periods of like, yeah, it's not right, but we don't know what it is. But nobody ever said, and I actually did ask, like, can you check her brain? How do you check her brain? And I had no idea that you could put all these leads on your head. And so, yes, those were all the types of things that were happening, but I didn't know. And the thing was, I think the one thing being an educator to me is swimming is like such a critical skill. And it's not just about learning to swim in water. I think it sort of bleeds into all the other parts of your life for survival skills. So I started taking her to swimming classes at 5 months old. She did amazing. So I was like, well, she does do all the stuff they ask her to do in swimming class. So maybe she's okay. And these are just freak things. I don't know. The girl swims by herself today, rides a bike, rides a scooter. Her peers who have this genetic mutation, they're nonverbal and non-mobile. And a lot of people have made fun of us, and they still do, because we do 14 hours of therapy a week. But I'm telling you right now, that is what makes her thrive and flourish the way she is. And she is one hell of a fighter.
Yeah. And I think what works for some people doesn't work for others. So it's like to the people that are making fun of like you or freaking like screw you. Like,
Right.
like stay in your own fucking lane because
Yeah.
like you have no business to say, like, if your child was, finish that statement, right? Because
Right.
like, and that's the thing that doesn't matter. And it's interesting because I think that there's this like, and I'm sure if we did like the research, there's some weird correlation between swimming and because I've talked about it, like I was a swimmer at his childhood and that was my physical activity. And so for somebody with cardio, it probably kept me in better shape and prepared to get through some of the things otherwise, especially as I got to the level of competitive swimming. And so I just find that really unique, that is the activity of choice. Another notch in the belt for Team Michael and Akira's bond. So.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
I wanted to point out too, Radhika, that you followed your intuition, that you knew intuitively. And, they say mother's intuition, and they say that for a reason. And that's because we are the best judges of what is right and what is wrong with our children. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's so important because, again, going back to what I said earlier, we are taught that when a doctor says something, oh, there's nothing wrong. Oh, you're overreacting. Oh, you're thinking you're seeing one thing, but that's not really what it is, that we're supposed to shut down at that point and say, okay, the doctor says there's nothing wrong, so there's nothing wrong. But your intuition inside is telling you something is not right. And so I think it's very important for us to learn. And I'm sure that you had that feeling when you were going through your illness, that your intuition is telling you these things that they are saying that you need to do, or they're saying these things aren't happening, that you're like, no, something's not right. And I'm going to follow that feeling, and I'm going to find an answer.
Well, I'll tell you, I did. I had a lot of experience with that because, when I got sick, I had this tiny little nodule on my neck. And mind you, I'd ran track, played tennis, and had been doing Muay Thai kickboxing. And I think I was like at 13 or 14 years when I found this thing on my neck. And I kept having these weird experiences. It was like only one side all of a sudden I couldn't hear. All of a sudden it's like I couldn't see out of one eye. I was like, this is some strange stuff. And when I pushed on that little nodule, it'd be like everything went back to normal. It was the strangest thing. It was like pushing a button. Everything went back to normal. And I went to my PCP. My father's a physician. And I also saw a friend who was, a physician in training. All three of them were like, you need to see a psychiatrist. You are out of your mind. There's nothing wrong. And yeah, no, that's not going to happen. And I was living in the DC area at the time, happened to be crossing. There's a bridge coming out of Virginia into DC. I happened to be crossing it at 5 p.m. High traffic time, all lanes packed. I was on the bridge and I suddenly couldn't see. Everything went blank. It was all black. Put the car in parks, trying to find my phone, dropped my purse, so I couldn't figure out where my phone was. And all I hear is people screaming and cursing at me, honking like crazy because I just didn't want to drive my car and like fall in the river or hurt somebody. And so obviously the cop showed up and he's waving his hands in my face. I grabbed his hands, hysterical, like, please, could you just get my phone and call this person? She will come and help me get my car off the, bridge. There's something wrong, but nobody believes me. And he finally said, oh, then I definitely can't do that. I have to call the ambulance. Somebody needs to check you out. It's not safe. And when the EMT came, the guy was like, I don't know what's wrong, but definitely something is wrong. You definitely can't see. It's very clear you can't see. And that's when I got help because he gave my friend a doctor's phone number. He saw me and the gentleman was like, I'm going to refer you to this doctor who will tell you what's wrong. I am not allowed to tell you what's wrong. And that's when I got my diagnosis about what I had. So absolutely. Intuition is like the biggest thing. And if you don't lead with it, you don't trust your intuition, you can't advocate for yourself or anybody else.
Yeah. And I think, and this is, there's parts of us that are still stubborn, right? There's, we can have the intuition, but even us as like the warriors that we are, we push that limit. It's that ledge that we talk about. And sometimes it takes being paralyzed or blind on a bridge to be like, all right, that's my limit. For me, it was my, my paralyzed stroke to be like, all right, I succumb. I give up, I'm giving in, I'm giving over, because there's a difference between reckless abandon of like, I hear what you're saying, but fuck science. And like I said earlier, listen to them, do your best, and really also find your spiritual guide in that process as well. Because I think it is important, and you make a great point, is if you have a doctor that you're seeing that you just consistently don't agree with, get a second opinion.
Yeah.
Get a third opinion. Now, don't do the thing where people try to search out their answer, because that's just a rabbit hole that'll cost you way too much time and money. But get to a place where you're comfortable with the answer. Find somebody who can give you the answer in a way that you can process it. Because as somebody I made this rule with myself at a young age. If I don't feel good, I'm going to the emergency room. I've gotten on conversations with the I've literally gotten in screaming arguments with the insurance company, and they're like, you go way too much. I'm like, the time I don't will be the time that my life insurance covers this instead of you.
I think that is a good point, Mike, that whenever you feel bad, you go to the ER, because a lot of times we feel like when we do things like that we're making like a big deal, that we're overreacting, we're being dramatic.
Well, it is.
But there are times when really and truly there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Well, that's what happened. I thought I was taking Akira because she had a fever that I couldn't break. Pediatrician in the ER saw her and went, you're getting admitted. I was like, I don't understand. Yeah. You're getting a room. We'll see you upstairs. I was like, I just came here for a fever. They're like, yeah, that's not what's going on. And that's how we ended up in the hospital this time, right? And I was sort of like, what? But again, intuition, right? Just, she couldn't tell me she didn't feel good, but I was like, yeah, she's not acting herself. So yeah, it's important.
And I think that, like, we hear about those stories about the people that, swallow a penny and it gets lodged in their throat. They go to the hospital and they find that they had cancer and they are able to catch it and cure them because of that moment. And like, to me, that's the universe's aspect of it, right? Like, you're always going to be given the tools that you need. Like, the universe is always going to provide. Like, you're always going to have the opportunity. Are you doing your part? And is there somebody on the other side who can provide the service, willing, able, and available? And sometimes you just got to find that perfect syncope. But that's why it's so important to advocate and be consistent. And it's horrible when, we see our children go through anything. But the one good thing about that situation with Akira is, every time this happens, you get closer to answers, and you build your report a little bit more, right? Like, you're saying, well, like, hey, look, y'all still don't believe me, but it's not a coincidence that, every time she has a seizure, it's, like 5 days in the hospital, or every time that we have this incident, this happens. That's collecting data, right? And as the analytical people that we are by human nature, enough data over time, and sadly, sometimes this is what it takes, but enough data over time, it's like, how can you not help? How can you not listen? How can you not, and we're extremists. Like, if something doesn't go the way that it's supposed to go, like, I'm all about just. Like, I want things to be just. I want there to be a balance. I want justice, and I want things to just be right. And if I don't have the answer, which a lot of times I don't, and I can admit, I want to find the answer. And if it's not the answer, again, that satisfies my heart, literally, physically, and emotionally, I'm going to find the person that might be giving me the same answer, but in a way that suffices my ability. Bedside manner is vital to me because I need somebody who's going to be able to speak truthfully to me, but not an asshole. Like, let me know that you actually care, because, otherwise, it's not, there's no point. Like, I can't work with somebody that's just going to run me down as another patient because I have issues. Like, it's funny, whenever I see a new doctor, I'm like, are you ready? Are you strapped in? Because, like, they'll get my medical chart over and they're like, whew, I read War and Peace quicker than your medical record. But that's why it's so important. Again, doctors, not all doctors have this, blindsidedness, but it's so important that we find the ones that work with us and work for us. I've met with tons of different cardiologists, and there's times where I get in a room with someone, I'm like, no, this is not going to work. And that is okay. And I urge people to give yourself permission. If you have this, like, if you can't tell your primary care doctor every single thing, that's the wrong primary care doctor. Period. I get my physical every year. I get, I do like full diagnostic checkup. I text my primary care doctor, and it took me years to find somebody that I connected with like that. But there's nothing that I can't say, because they're going to be your conduit of change. And it starts there before you even get to a specialist, because a lot of times they want the referral. And so I think that that's the support system that you have control over.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we have a phenomenal pediatrician, and actually, mom friends I have are like, how do you go to that practice? And they have all these issues and concerns. And I was like, listen, I took Keyshawn to his wellness appointment. The doctor walks in and is like, oh my God, I'm so sorry about Akira. I'm like, what are you talking about? I just read the hospital notes and I can't believe it. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, oh, I read all my hospital notes of all my kiddos, and I can't even believe she ended up in the hospital. We're here for Keyshawn. It was fabulous, right? And same thing. I was like, oh, and actually I'm going to make an appointment to bring Akira in for this referral and that referral. Nope, all set. I'll take care of it for you.
Yeah.
It was done that same day, right? So it is critical to have that relationship. And I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I'm currently not vaccinating because, we know that Akira was injured by vaccines that she did take. So we're just spacing them out a lot, very far apart, just to be safe. And her practice demands that she does it. And she is like, no, I agree with you and I understand why. Yeah. And your kids are underweight and I understand your concerns. So I love that we have that, right? We're just really lucky that we have it. And others are like, oh, but I can't. And I like, keep looking. Can't tell you. Just because mine won't take you doesn't mean that somebody else won't. So that's the other thing too. It's because you connect with one doctor doesn't mean that they're going to do that for all of their patients either.
Right. Yeah. It's a relationship that I wish people would take more seriously. So anytime I need a doctor, I interview. Because you're kicking on a very important part of my life. It's just like any other relationship. It's like, we've got to get to know each other first. We've got to figure out if we have the same values, the same understanding, how we communicate, how often we communicate. I'm somebody who, this is my stance. I listen to my body, and if something's a question mark, I'm not taking chances, because I've done that and been at home and had heart attacks, strokes, seizures, and I'm not doing that anymore. Like, I've got a child to take care of, and I know that I have to be A-okay. And so if it's the difference between, and it's funny now, because like when I had COVID, I called my doctor. I'm like, I'm having a hard time breathing. She was like, go to the emergency room. Like, she's like, I'm not going to wait to see you. I'm not going to have you come in. She's like, not that everybody needs to go to the emergency room all the time, because I don't think that it's something that, we should take advantage of. But when you have underlying issues, like something that might not be as serious for somebody, all of a sudden becomes an emergency. When you have, neurological issues, a high fever is a whole lot different than somebody whose kid just, wasn't feeling that great at the end of the day. And so we find our ways to justify, but, if I can't breathe because I'm having issues, but then on top of that, I have my heart issue and respiratory and the cardiovascular system are so hand in hand, there's an issue when my heart rate's plummeting. So going to the ER is a natural component. And I think that at the end of the day, we incorporate grace into our understanding of being like, I care about people's opinion, but I really don't give a shit about what people think about my decisions in that sense. Because at the end of the day, I would rather them, tease me, make fun of me, than sit in a pew at my funeral. And maybe that's extreme, but
I think we don't put enough value on the relationship that we have with our doctors. I think that, again, because of the society that we live in, there's a lot of shame and a lot of fear of judgment. And so when there's something wrong with you, it's very hard to say, this is what I'm feeling, because we're afraid that our doctor is going to judge us, right? And I know for myself, I knew that I had found the right doctor when I'm overweight. And so when I would go to the doctor and say, I don't feel well, their first response was, you're overweight, you need to lose weight. And I'm like, no, there's something there. And so when I went and I sat down and I told my current doctor, this is what I'm experiencing, she said, we're going to figure this out. We're going to figure out what is wrong with you. Yes, you need to lose weight. Yes, you need to lead a more healthier lifestyle. But before we can get there, we have to fix these problems. And that was the first time that someone had ever really listened to me. And I think that is so important, is not just your medical care. Yes, that is critical, but to find people in your life who will hear you and who will listen to what you're saying, because that's what we want people to learn how to do, is to be heard. And so that's why talking about advocacy for yourself is so important, because you want people in your life, whether it's your medical doctor, whether it's your psychiatrist, who listen to you.
Definitely. But I will say this, when you're in that moment of crisis and you go to your go-to people thinking that they will support you, hear you, and they don't, it's crushing.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's happened time and time again, and it's sort of, this cycle of cleaning house, right? Cleaning those people out of your system, out of your space, that because they're just not able to. I don't think it's anything personal or bad, right? I think they just don't have the capacity to, and maybe once they did, but that doesn't mean they can again. And, it's interesting because I listen to other families who are going through this, like, oh yeah, we have no friends, we have no family, we have nobody. And I just sort of stay quiet, and largely because I hear what they say, but it's like they've entered a state of depression because nobody's hearing them. And one of the things that I really would like to do is create a community that folks can be heard, or at least to help them find their voice. Because I think that's all part of being a warrior, right? Is like, can't just have all these lessons and don't impart that knowledge. And Michael, we've talked about overserving, it's like, don't need to overserve here, but definitely can share sound bites of information, right? Of keep looking, keep talking, it's like, don't lose hope that somebody doesn't hear you or that they can't be there to support you. And I know everybody's got something going on.
And I know that's we've really tried to do with our warrior group is really make that a safe space for community of conversation. But I think it's important to recognize, and this is something that I've been thinking about lately. Not every person is meant for every season. Like not every person in your life is meant for every season in your life. And this is from a very modest place of understanding, but we outgrow people. People outgrow us. We are on the same journey in one regard, but very much on individualized paths. The goal is to keep some company on your path long enough that, you have that community and stuff. But there are times where you have to go it alone, but you're never truly alone when you have the support. But it's like climbing a mountain, as I so love to do. It's one thing to say, I've got my check-in people. They know where I'm at. We can be in conversation. I can train with people. But at the end of the day, 2 legs, 1 foot in front of the other, going up the mountain, carrying whatever I need to carry on my own. You do the work and you can rely on others for the support, but nobody can do the work for you. And I think oftentimes when we talk about I'm alone, what we're really saying is I don't want to do the work. And that's important to distinguish, because not wanting to do the work, nobody can solve that but you. Versus I'm overwhelmed and I need to offload some of this. That's vital. And asking for help is hard, especially for people who are used to doing the advocacy work, who are used to doing the work for others, who are used to serving. But I can't say it enough. And I know that I feel like I've said this almost in every episode now, is you cannot serve from an empty cup. And so finding ways to fulfill ourselves and our needs, even if it has nothing to do with the bigger picture, like art, creativity, music, meditation, exercise, whatever you need. And I posed this question yesterday in our group is, how do you get peace? How do you find peace? And I would love to kind of hear your responses, because I think that's important to all of this. We talk a lot about the chaos, the strength, and the struggle, but how do you find peace?
Well, I can tell you, we're leaving today to go to the beach. Akira has been struggling for a month, and it has been one horrendous, awful month. And all 3 of us were like, yep, peace out. We're going for 5 days, and just to do exactly that, right? Rest and sleep and relax. Refill that cup. And, for us, it's spending time by the water and just being in the sunshine. It's like we almost don't need to do anything else but just be there and be still, just to try to reset. She's currently tracked out. She starts back after next week. So it's a great way to sort of catch our breaths and reset ourselves as we come back to dive back into that next cycle of helping her get diagnosed again and assessed and supported and all of that. So and it's critical for me. I sort of totally lost all my wits about myself last week and really needed time to pull it all back together, pulled it back together enough to say, okay, we need to get away for a couple of days and really just rest. So that's, I don't think I understood that though until this time, until this hospitalization of this needs to just become part of the routine. Okay, we got hospitalized, the week at home, get it together, and we need to go away for a couple of days. Just going to be part of our routine, right? Because I understand we all need it. We're all fried. We just need a hard reset.
I find it interesting that when I think of filling my cup, I also think of going to the beach, being at the ocean. And so I know for Mike, his way of getting peace is being out hiking on the mountain. And so it's interesting that for all three of us, it's nature related, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we forget that having that attachment to nature, being able to get out and just experience that kind of quietness that you get when you're in your place. My place happens to be the beach. Sounds like yours and Akira's and Keyshawn's is as well. And so when I'm there, when I'm out, I love to be on the ocean. I'm filling my cup in 8 days. I'm going on a cruise. That's my vacation of choice. And so I think it is so important for us to understand what it is that fills our cup, what it is that helps us reset. But I just find it interesting that for all three of us, it's nature related.
Oh, absolutely.
Taps into a primal nature of connecting to our surroundings. And I do believe, because my experience in nature is what I call, like, when I describe spirituality, that's what I incorporate. It's that connection to my surroundings. It's like, I am totally the dude that's going to be running barefoot in the woods. Like, like I want to totally just do the whole, like, running butt naked around the moon, like give me all of that, spiritual woo stuff all the time, and I'd be happy, for real.
There's actually some scientific theory behind that, because they say that when you're barefoot and you connect with the earth, that it's very important to it helps your body so much. So it's not that crazy to think about running barefoot through the woods. They say it's very important to have that barefoot connection with earth. So,
well, that's how you tune into earth's vibrations, right? And I think that's what, unfortunately, living in this digital society that we live in, everybody's behind computers and technology and devices, and it's like, get out. My kids still are not into tablets and TVs because you know what they want to do? They want to be outside digging in the dirt. Yeah. In my backyard, I'm sure my neighbors are like, oh, we hate her guts because I just let them leave all their shovels and trucks and toys, whatever. Even Akira, that's just what they love to do. Same thing in my front yard. My neighbors are probably like, we just want to kill her because my curbside appeal, I don't care about it. They want to, they're growing plants and watering rocks. I'm like, go right ahead, have fun. What are you going to do? Say no? They need to have something to connect with. And I do too. So I'm like, go for it. We don't do it enough.
Your kids' well-being is more important than your lawn, right?
Oh, absolutely. I was like, I don't care. Let them enjoy. You can grow grass anytime, but them to be able to be barefoot, feeling those vibrations, they don't even understand. Keyshawn doesn't even get it. He loves to hug trees, and it's hilarious. He sees a tree and he's like, "Oh, I want to hug the tree." I'm like, "Go ahead," And people are like, "You let him hug the tree." I don't care what anybody thinks. Child is drawn to the tree. Let him hug the tree. Why not? He gets energy from it.
Yeah, I love it. I have this ritualistic approach to when I am on my trips and when I hike. It's a ritual of gratitude. Anytime I camp, I always kind of do this homage, like, of honor, thanking the land for letting me, take residence for the night. Anytime I'm on a trail, thanking it for, letting me experience, because I do believe that, we kind of, I've talked about this with you guys a lot and kind of joke about it. Like, I become like the male Snow White. Anytime that I go out into nature, specifically any of these deep, like, wilderness type excursions, I always run into animals, and I honestly believe they're put in my path as my protectors, because I do approach with such gratitude. And we're talking about like snakes and bears and wolves and like animals that are known to be fierce, approaching me with love and compassion and protection. And I just can't ignore that. Now I'm not naive enough to like go run and go, pet the big fluffy bear as much as I want to, but it's the fact that it's on my path and I can recognize it and just have that moment of like gratitude that we share. Because when we can minimize fear, when we can shrink fear down and replace it with love, compassion, and gratitude in any parts of our lives, I think that that's always going to win. Because it's very fearful when we look at our child going through something. It's very fearful when we realize that as a protector, we cannot protect. It's very fearful when we ourselves are going through something and there's this unknown. But when we lean into that and we say, I'm good with, and maybe I take it a step further, but like, I always look at it like this. If today's the day that I die, it's a good day to die because I have lived all my days before this to a place of complete gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we got to get to that place individually. We can't thrust it upon other people. And as protectors of our children, we certainly don't want our kids there. But getting to that headspace of protection that is eternal, love that's eternal, I think is really important. And so give us a little bit of, we talk about, and from the marketing standpoint, we've kind of like coined this all like, Akira's grace. Part of that is because the child just has the heart of gold, but then also, the fact that through all of this, she literally has the grace of a swan when she's dancing, which to me speaks to the poetic beauty of life. You take somebody who had legs that were shaking when they were walking as a child, and they make art with the way that they flow across a stage. And to me, that is true grace. That's true beauty. And I think that that's God, the universe's gift to us through Akira is there is this grace in sickness because life is always going to find a way. And she will always be able to demonstrate love. If she might not be able to have her voice in verbal context, but like I know, like, when she lights up, it's it heals, right? So her heart does demonstrate truly Akira's grace. And so just kind of give us a here and now of Akira and just so we can all kind of really understand the scope.
Well, the here and now, Akira actually means graceful strength in Sanskrit. So the child lives up to her name 110%. And the here and now, that's hers.
Yeah.
She picked it up and goes, I want this. The child never wants anything when we go anywhere, ever. She just saw that and goes, okay, I want it.
And for the record, for people that are just listening, it's a pillow that says love.
Yes. Akira's spirit, heart, everything is love. The child, I have seen her break people down who are like, I do not like you. I don't want to be near you. The girl doesn't care. She just would keep, push them, poke them, hug them, hug them. Don't hug me. Don't touch me. I don't. And today, they see her and they go to her for a hug and they, want that love from her. So, the child's capacity to love is incredible. And talk about grace, man, this kid was poked by every damn doctor she saw this last hospitalization. And the kid had her smile on her face every single time, felt like shit and smiling on her face. They stuck needles in her arms, in her fingers. And she just looked into those nurses' eyes and held their hands while they did whatever they did, But it was also a lot of love from a lot of those providers that were supporting her, So she comes home and what does she do? She had been coloring pictures this whole last month in brown. everything was brown. I was like, she is not okay. That is not my child, which is why I knew she wasn't okay. Just didn't know what was wrong. She couldn't tell me what was wrong either. She was at the hospital, comes home. I was working frantically trying to catch up. I've been trying to catch up after a 5 days hospital stay. I looked down on the floor and the child's colored this gorgeous picture, pink and purple house, her and her brother, all these colors, all these rainbow colored flowers. And she goes, look, I drew this for you. I had to stop. I was like, oh my God, and she gets you every single time, exactly when you think she's just going to fall apart and wither away. That child just keeps rebounding and rebounding and rebounding. She's incredible. So she dances around my house. She just watches one performance. Doesn't matter what genre of dance. The girl is like Rain Man, can just mimic it exactly perfectly to the beat, can hear a song, can sing it back to you. No training. It's incredible. So, she's always eternally flowing and glowing. And yeah, it's really incredible for somebody who really has so much dysfunction in her brain. She has 125 seizures in a 24-hour period. There's 7 types of seizures. She has 6 of the 7. So for a child to be that sweet, that loving, I'm lucky to be her mother.
And I just want to kind of like, how do you, because I know it's, you can't stay on all the time, but how do you, and maybe as a parent to somebody who deals with so much, what advice would you give to any parent who's dealing with a child with a pediatric illness to be able to find that well of strength, or just to be able to get by, like just general advice?
You have to make time and do something for yourself, by yourself, because of yourself. Doesn't matter what that is. Yes, they use all these fancy words about self-care. Me, the day we got diagnosed, the next day, I went and found a personal trainer. Twice a week, 5 o'clock in the morning, without fail. It's not about wanting to get slim and fit. It's about, if I don't keep myself mentally sharp and alert, there's no way I could do what I do every day. No way. But that works for me. That doesn't mean that works for the next person. But whatever that is, a hobby, turn it into a business and do that. Whatever it is, it really doesn't matter. And some folks that try to tell me, oh, you don't do any self-care. Okay, well, I know what self-care I do. I just don't go advertising everywhere that that's what I do, right? And everybody's practices are different. Mine, I wake up every day at 4 o'clock. Whether I went to bed at 1 a.m. or not is irrelevant. I still wake up at 4 o'clock. I have a spiritual practice that I've been doing for the last 18 years. Still doing it. It's why I'm still standing up straight. I don't think if I didn't do that and I didn't exercise, I'd be dead. I'd be depressed. And I could not take care of this beautiful little thing that is fighting for her life every day. So yeah, I think it's critical to make sure that you make time for yourself and do something by yourself. And, that guilt of, oh, I can't leave my child alone. Yes, you can, because you know what? Every time you do that, you're filling up your cup even more to be able to pour further into that child. And if you have other children that don't have anything, they need a lot of love and support too. They get neglected 99.9% of the time. It's, really important to make time for them, make sure they know that you're there for them too, So those are my words of wisdom about that.
Yeah, I think routine is vital for that, because it's important for you and for them, right? Because I think children in general need routine, but especially when they have so much unexpected, you've got to be their grounding force for routine, but then you need that too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For sure. All right, we're going to throw you into the hot seat here. We're going to ask you our hot seat questions. Okay. And I think that this is just a great culmination of, talking about Akira, talking about you, talking about our team. I'm loving where all this energy is going. So go with our 3-question hot seat questions that we ask all of our guests. And so the first is, how do you define what it means to be a warrior?
You got to know when to practice grit, dig in deep, and have the perseverance to keep fighting. Even if you feel like you have nothing left, got to dig deep. I think it's really what makes you a warrior. But the thing to really be able to take the title of warrior is to have grace. Can't be a blubbering mess and expect people to understand what you're asking for, advocating for, needing. And it is definitely critical to find your voice, to be able to ask for help. It's not beneath you or anything. It doesn't make you less than, right? So I think grit, grace, and finding voice to be able to get that help, ask for that help, is what makes you a warrior.
Yeah, I read this quote the other day, and it was something to the account of like, success is getting up when you can't.
Yep.
And that to me is like that grit. It's like, keep going even when you can't. It's that push through, because like, what's the option? What's the other option? Giving up? Giving up's not the option.
Right. And it's not an option, and I was recently reminded about grit. I had a vulnerable moment and was hysterical, and then just went, nope, need to turn that off and dig deep.
Right. And I don't think it's and what grit is not suck it up, buttercup.
No.
Grit
Absolutely.
is you fucking got this already. Now show us.
Right.
That's a difference. Like, it's not
Right.
Grit is not from a place of deprecation of,
No.
You got more in the tank, whatever. It's acknowledging that you have more in the tank, and giving you that fuel to push through. I think that's important.
Yeah. Well, it's being able to have that vision for the long goal, the long-term goal, right? Not the short moment in the moment, but really knowing, okay, I need to get this kid not past age 18, but into being a positive adult, having some kind of positive life, because I'm getting told that's not possible. Okay. Yeah. Fuck all of that. She's going to, Don't know how, but we are going to do it together. And we are. So yeah, grit is really something that I think comes from knowing that you can do it, even if you muster up all the courage and everything you have, but you could definitely do it.
And so our second question, which I think this whole episode has been one great answer to, is how have you demonstrated this definition in your life?
People ask me, do you drink? Have you done drugs? I haven't done any of those things. Those, I understand why people do. But to me, it's just an excuse, right? We were all put on here to do something, find our purpose, and I think I found my purpose. It's been a long road. Definitely I found my purpose. And, the work ahead is how to share that, right? And how to help others find it. So yeah, I think it's really all about the experiences and using them as stepping stones, really, not to use it to go downhill, but to say, I'm going to keep climbing, get to the top of that mountain. But I don't think I realized I was already at the top of the mountain. And yeah, it's having to celebrate being on top of that mountain and really finding joy in those moments.
Yeah. And I know that I've talked about this before, but much like fear or any other conquest, we already have the tools. We already have we're fully capable of achieving anything and everything that we want already. It's but we're usually the last person that's convinced.
Yeah.
And when you are convinced, you are unstoppable. And so I'm so proud and glad to be part of your life. And really, I think this is like a culmination for all of us of really what the last 2.5, 3 years has been of really, us building our core team together is that arch, that growth, that scale of, you know, being able to recognize in each other and as a collective unit, that growth of like, oh yeah, no, it's collecting. It doesn't matter how many times you have to go back to the well. It doesn't matter how many times you go back to the drawing board, because that's the critical route, right? That, you know, oh, you're doing it over again. Well, I don't care how many times I need to do it over, because the time that I get it right is going to be the time that everybody benefits. Because that means that I'm living into my purpose to serve. That means that I am flourishing. That means the team is flourishing. And that's what's important. We'll go back to the drawing board how many times that we need. The goal is to minimize the gap, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we're there. We are all there. It's convincing yourself that that's the factor. And so what is one piece of advice that you can give somebody to help them live into this definition of being a warrior?
Trust your gut. And don't be afraid of your voice. And don't be afraid of the words that come out of your mouth. They have value. They have a lot of depth. I think we don't give ourselves and each other enough credit when it comes to that, you know. And people's actions, they do speak louder than words. Think about what you do, not just what you say. You know, what you do can speak volumes. You don't need to even speak sometimes. You can just do. Right? And your message, it can be heard and received loud and clear. And it doesn't need to be ugly, nasty, rude, anything, you know. So yeah.
I think it's safe to say that our actions can be our loudest message.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Show me, don't tell me, you know.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I guess just to kind of condense that, it is trust your gut, use your voice.
Yes.
That's right. So one of the things that I like to try to make sure we do is, you know, hindsight is 2020. Obviously, you're going to think of something later on that you're like, oh, this would have been so cool to add, or this would have been a really good point to make. And so, is there something that you want to add or something that you want to maybe speak about that you didn't get a chance to, or things that came up, but because we were in this flow of conversation that you didn't get to say? I wanted to just save some space here for you to add anything else that you might want to add to this conversation. And if not, that's okay.
You know, I think we're so groomed to think, oh, I can't talk to this person, or I can't say this to this person. And, you know, I think it's important to try to remove those biases, right? And to sort of remove those, because we don't know what we all are going through. There's sometimes this isn't enough time in a day in a conversation. And sometimes we're just consumed with our own lives and our own crises or whatever's going on. It's like, stop and try to check in on somebody else, you know, and you'll be surprised how many folks can share their stories and can actually support you, you know, even when you don't think that that's possible. So definitely something to think about.
And how can people support you, Akira, or really just anything that you're trying to do with everything right now?
Support is somebody pay for Akira to go to dance class. That would be great. Or gymnastics. And Keyshawn is dying for male role models and wants to be able to go fishing, learn how to play sports, and he doesn't want mommy to teach him. So those are really things that I can only think of. But yeah, you know, I think those are the ways we could use some support. Real support is, you know, building some of those friendships and consistency of engagement so that they know and understand that they're loved. You know, they're sick of seeing doctors, nurses, and therapists. They really are. You know, they want to have some friends and do some fun things. And it's hard to work full time because I advocate full time. And now I'm having to advocate for Keyshawn because Keyshawn is showing a lot of signs of being sibling of a child with medical complexity and special needs. And he needs a lot of support. So
Yeah, it's vital
my job
to build
is
community around our children for sure.
Yes. So, always up for a play date and an outing and something fun. So.
And we've talked about it in the episode that I talked about being a Make-A-Wish kid. The goal is not to distract from or ignore the fact that they have things going on, but it's to highlight the beauty of childhood and let that radiate way beyond anything else. Make that more powerful so it's not a distraction. It's just where you're putting that energy.
Right, exactly.
Just letting a kid be a kid,
Exactly.
Outside of all this medical stuff that she goes through, sometimes it's just equally important to just let a child be a child, So I think that is very important as far as Anya, my oldest daughter, nothing as serious as Akira, but she grew up chronically asthmatic. And she, for the first 10 years of her life, she was on a treatment 3 times a day. And so not letting that overshadow allowing her to be a kid was very crucial to her development.
Yep, sure is.
All right. Well, I think we covered a lot today. I feel like this is just becoming a trend of like everyone that we talk to, like we just don't want to end the conversation. So I just feel like it's just going to be like everybody that's on is going to get a second episode and a third episode because our conversations have just been really riveting. And, I know we kind of joked about it, like, well, what are we going to talk about? Right. Like, and here we are an hour and a half in, and we could probably go for another hour and a half realistically. So we'll definitely have to do this again in the future. And we will stay up to date on what's going on with Akira. Certainly we could put some information about, what's going on with her and some of the backstory. Obviously, we've done some videos and stuff in the past we can share. And so we could put stuff like that in the links down in the description. And then anyone that's in our Warrior Facebook group, please reach out to Radhika if you have some insight or, you've got some little ones. We could set up some warrior play dates. I'm all for that. The little warriors are the ones that matter the most, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, excellent. And we are going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. And we look forward to hearing from you guys about, how things are going with this podcast. And we will bring you another episode next week. Hey Warriors, it's Michael, and I want to thank you for listening to the Warrior of Impact podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to us on your favorite streaming platforms and leave us a 5-star review. For more information, check out warriorofimpact.com.